We're gonna start the stream in a minute. I'm getting everything set up. A little bit off today. Where are we? Where's my pen? Just give us a minute, guys, and we'll get the stream started. There we go. Found it. Alright. And does it work? Let's test it. Yeah. It works. Alright. We will go ahead and get started. So, we are going to do a video analysis today. I had 5 athletes, a few from out of the country, send me videos to critique. And as always, I like prefacing these streams by saying that this is just my opinion on their technique. I'm not going to say that any way of lifting is right or wrong necessarily. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies, a lot of variations. People teach technique in many different ways, and a lot of those people have success, even in the ways that may contradict one another. So just keep that in mind with this. Like, just keep an open mind in general whenever people are talking about training or technique. There are many different ways to success in this sport. So let's get started with Olivia. Olivia is a Swedish lifter, and she sent this lift in to me. So the format of this, I'm going to play the video over once. Then I'm going to share my thoughts and lightly go over parts of the lift that I like, parts of the lift that I think could be improved. And throughout my dialogue, if you guys want to type in a question that you have or a comment, feel free to chime in. And at the end of each video, if there are any questions or comments, I'll try to answer them as best as I can. So, alright, let's watch Olivia's clean and jerk. Alright, so overall that looked like a pretty crisp lift. So, what I noticed, she comes off the floor nicely. Look at her back before she starts pulling off the floor. And look at her back when the bar is at the middle of her knees. Her hips and shoulders rose together, so that back angle stayed constant. Very nice. So that meant that the primary way she was getting this bar off the floor is by using her legs. So very happy with that. And something my coach would always observe in this position right here is the angle of the shins. And notice how her shins are vertical. Her shins are about perpendicular to the floor. So my coach would say that's a sign you're getting your knees back, or in other words, it's a sign that you're using your legs. So already coming off the floor very nicely. And so she keeps the bar close, and this is a pretty decent power position. Her shoulders are on top, maybe slightly behind the bar. She's flat-footed right here, and her knees are still bent. But then notice as she extends, the bar kind of pops away from her. You would like to see the bar stay pretty close to the body on the extension, and then immediately after the extension is when you would see the bar leave the body and start traveling to the shoulders. So the bar kind of kicks away from her, long story short. I would have her practice pulls and then focus on, as she extends at the top of the pull, that the bar is brushing past the hips. So say if this was her hip right here, and this was the bar coming up, can you guys see that? You would want the bar, oh, that looks ugly. You would want the bar to just brush past, just lightly come away from the hips. Right now, it looks like the bar is coming in pretty aggressively and then popping off pretty aggressively. So, just try to get more of a brush, because the more of a brush-like contact you get, the closer that bar is going to stay as it travels to your shoulders. So then she pulls under the bar, and right here you could see that the bar has traveled above her shoulders. So the bar is about right here, and her shoulder is about right here. So you see there's that gap, there's that clearance between the bar and her shoulders. So you could think about it two different ways. The first way you can think about it is she pulled the bar higher than she needed to. Or the second way you could think of it is she dropped under the bar quicker than she needed to. And so recall that the bar kind of banged away from her at the top of the pull. I'm wondering if that might have had a little bit of an influence on it. When the bar bangs away from you, it causes the bar to loop. And long story short, it causes it to travel in an inefficient path. So I would try to address the bar banging away from her upper thigh / hip first, and then see if that doesn't fix the problem with the bar traveling higher than it needs to. If you guys hear the phrase that the bar is crashing on you in a clean, this is what it's referring to. The bar is traveling above your shoulders before it then goes to your shoulders. Ideally, you would like for the bar to just go ahead at its highest point, it almost land directly on top of the shoulders versus going above and then landing on her. So another way you can think of it, say if we were looking at a lifter from, let's say from the side, yeah, right here, I think you could see that. All right, so say this is the bar right here, and it's traveling like this to get to the shoulders. That's what you'd like. And it looks like in this case, the bar is going well above the shoulders and then landing on your shoulders. So I'm not sure if that makes sense to you guys, but you'd like it to go from the hips to the shoulders in a pretty direct manner, not from the hips to above the shoulders and then to the shoulders. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, it doesn't look like it creates too much of a problem for her. She's still able to stand up out of the clean. And she sticks the jerk. And so the dip and drive looked nice. The dip and drive looks straight. But just notice something looks off when she hits this split. And so slowing this split down, pay attention to how her feet land, or the timing of when her feet land. And I'm going to try to adjust this camera a little right here. And so just observe that right there. So notice her front foot is in focus right here. So let's circle it just to emphasize this. Notice that the front foot is in focus and the back foot is still blurry. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the front foot has landed on the ground. It's stopped moving. There's no motion blur anymore. It's planted on the ground. And that the back foot is still moving. So what that means is that the front foot has landed on the ground before her back foot has landed. And so when this happens, this tends to push the athlete's hips or their torso backwards, back in this direction right here. And then so instead of her being directly under the bar when she hits the split, her body gets kind of pushed back behind the bar. So I would tell her to try to think about the feet landing together, or maybe have her think about reaching her front foot about a half an inch further forward, just to get the feet to, at the very least, land simultaneously. Some coaches, and I feel like it's becoming more and more common, some coaches teach that the back foot should land before the front foot. I'm personally under the school of thought that the feet should land together, and if the back foot lands slightly before the front, then let it happen naturally. But either way, it's permissible and it's okay for the back foot to land before the front foot, and I'd say it's permissible for the feet to land together. but it's generally accepted that you never want the front foot to strike the ground before the back foot does in the split. So that's what I would think about Olivia, if you're watching this, to try and help your jerk. And she still recovered it and made it just fine, so. Alright, do we have any questions before we go on to the next lift? I'll wait for about 30 seconds as I clear this screen. Alright, if we don't have any questions, let's go ahead and move on to the next lift. So, Claudia, an athlete from Austria, sent this video to me. And note that this is not Australia. This is not the country that has kangaroos inhabiting it. This is, in fact, Austria, a European country. So, she sent me one of her clean and jerks. So, or I believe this is just a clean. So let's take a look at that again. So you guys could probably see that, but to start us off, let's draw a line in front of her toes at the start of her pull. Alright. And now let's play this pull and let's go to her landing and see what happens. Alright, so if you guys can see, and I'll adjust this so you guys can see it a little bit easier on here. You can see on that teal line, right around here, her toes start behind the line on the pull, and then as she goes to receive the bar, she jumps forward. Now, the majority of the time when an athlete jumps forward or backward, they do so to be able to fix their body underneath the bar, or they're doing so because they have to. The clean the bar is in front of her in this clean, so if she didn't hop forward when she caught it, she would have missed the lift. As simple as that. So now we need to explore why she hopped forward in this clean. And a good place to start when trying to diagnose an error in the lifts, when something's going wrong, is the beginning of the lift. So in her start position, her back is pretty flat. Her upper back looks to be slightly rounded. I think she could get her back more arched right here. You can see right here, just slightly rounded right here. So maybe just practice getting your middle to upper back more locked in before you start pulling. That'll help keep the bar closer throughout the pull. But also notice that the bar is starting right up against her shins right here. And so you have to err on the side of caution when you're starting with the bar right up against you, particularly in a snatch, but sometimes in a clean too, because if you start with the bar right up against you in a snatch or a clean, it has a tendency to drift away from you off the floor. Like, you really have to use your legs if you're going to start with the bar close to you, come off the floor. And for people with longer femurs, their knees, like you look, her knees are well above, maybe even ahead of the bar right there. So maybe she could change her stance a little bit, but I think it might also help with the way that she's built, just to start with a little bit of separation between the barbell and her shins and see if that helps. But that's one of my thoughts right there, because as the bar is coming off the floor, take note right here of this plate on the ground right before the bar comes off the floor. Let's draw a teal line right here. And now, as the bar comes off the floor, you can't really see it that well. You take note of the left side of the plates, and you can see though that the bar is just kind of drifting away from her. And so instead of her pulling the bar straight up and getting her legs out of the way for the bar to come straight up, she's having to pull the bar around her. So the bar is moving around her knees versus her knees moving around the bar. So she was forward. She was off balance there. And then as the bar is passing the knees, look at what happens with her feet, particularly this left foot. Where are we? All right. Take note of this foot. Right here. All right, you guys can see that. And as the bar is passing the knees, look at what her toes are doing. She's sitting so far back on her heels that her toes are coming off the ground, so that's a sign that she's coming off balance. And this is a byproduct of the bar was in front of her in the first part of the pull, so she was a little bit too far forward. So when the weight shifts during the pull, she has to revolve back, and then because she was so far forward at that first part of the pull, she ends up sitting really far back as the bar is like passing the knees. And guess what? If you're off balance and too far back on your heels when the bar is passing the knees, your weight's going to shift drastically forward at the top of the pull. And hey, look, that bar is away from her at the top of this pull. It bounces away, and then she has to hop forward to make it. So, long story short, I would tell her, one, to try to get that back more set in her start position. Maybe start with the bar a tiny bit away from her shins. And then the last thing, just really think hard about using your legs to get the bar off the floor. I think those three things will help improve your clean. And I think you'll find that the bar will stay closer, you'll stay a lot more balanced, and you won't hop forward as much. So, just a couple of thoughts. Alright, and I will shift to the next video. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Now this next lift is from Mads. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, and he's from Denmark. He sent me this clean and jerk in. So let's get this in the frame, and then we'll take a look at it. Alright, so he comes off the floor nicely. If you guys notice, you look at his elbows right here, notice that they're bent. And they're bent, even in a start position. So at first glance, it might be easy to say, oh, well, he's pulling with his arms. You needed to teach him to keep his arms relaxed or to try to flex his triceps to keep his arms straight. So there's a difference. So what he's doing is pulling on bent arms. There's a difference between what he's doing, pulling on bent arms, and pulling with your arms. Now, if you were pulling on bent arms, that would mean that when you first start the pull, the elbows are already slightly bent, and they stay about that same level of bent throughout the pull, which is what he's doing. He is pulling on bent arms. Now, if you were pulling with the arms, your arms would start off straight, and then mid-pull, they would bend. So note that these are two different phenomena. Pulling on bent arms is entirely separate from pulling with your arms, and a decent amount of weightlifting coaches don't consider what this athlete is doing as a technical fault. John Coffey would even say it might be beneficial to be able to do this because you get the bar in a higher position when you extend if the arms are bent. So just something to think about. And again, completely different from pulling with your arms. You do not want to do that. But just something, an idiosyncrasy that I noted from this lifter. But he comes off the floor nicely, and he has a little bit of a peculiar extension. Like in his power position, he reminds me of me in a way, because in his extension, or in his power position, he's leaning behind the bar. Notice that instead of him being flat-footed, he's on his toes, and instead of being on top or straight, he's leaning back already. So his lower body is shifted forward and his upper body is shifted backward. And as he extends, it's more of a lean back than a vertical extension. But he pulls under the bar nicely. Look, you were talking about the bar crashing in that last video. That's as high as a bar goes. It's right on his shoulders at its highest point in his pull under. So it's a very efficient pull under. If I were to give him any feedback on this, I would have to see what heavier cleans look like. But if I had to guess, the heavier and heavier his cleans get, the more and more he leans back. So maybe think about trying to stay flat-footed, trying to stay in the middle of that foot longer, and to try and stay over the bar a little bit longer. Again, I'm sure that the heavier it gets, the more he does that, but I'm all too familiar with it. The more you do it, the closer you get to a miss. So something to think about. But anyway, so he cleans the bar, stands right up, has a very good receiving position. And so, two things on this jerk. He's a powerful guy, but one thing I would want to address is his knees on this dip and drive. So look at his knees at the bottom of the dip right here, and then look what happens as he starts driving the bar up. Can you guys see that? He's dipping down, and his knees are going over his toes as he's dipping down, but as he changes direction and starts driving up, his knees cave in and his hips kind of rock forward. So that's going to affect the trajectory of his drive. So instead of it being a straight dip and a straight drive, with the knees rocking in and his hips coming forward, that bar is going to be a little bit forward. But also when your knees are caving in, that's a sign that you're predominantly using the quads. You're not using the whole legs on the drive. Because the glutes are what's going to track that knee over the toe to help pull it outwards. And so if the knee's caving in, the quads are kind of taking over on this drive. So really fight hard to keep those knees over the toes on the dip, on the turnaround, and on the drive. And the only other thing I would tell him to think about is to keep his feet under him on the power jerk. So look at where his feet start on the dip and drive. Right. Let's put X's. Whoop. Where were we? My phone is not standing up. There we go. Alright. So look at where his feet are on the dip and drive. Right here. Right here. And he drives the bar up, and then he hops him out. And from the angle, you can't really see how far the left foot went, but look at how far outwards that right foot went. And so for a power jerk, you have to anticipate that as the weight gets heavier, you're going to be driven down a little bit heavier and a little bit heavier. So you would like to set your lower body up, or you'd like to set your stance up in such a way that if need be, you have to squat down with the bar a little bit as it drives you down heavier and heavier. Now with his feet this wide, maybe he could squat down lower, but he would not stay as upright as if he had his feet a little bit more under him and were performing a squat. This would be more like a powerlifting stance where you're sitting back and the torso inclines forward. And if I had to guess, just based on his tendency to jump his feet out on this jerk, as the weights get heavier and as he gets near limit weights, I wouldn't doubt if his feet jump out even wider on the heavier attempts and maybe go out here instead. And then, just to exaggerate it, the heavier it gets, as he starts missing, the feet try to go even wider. That's what happens. Like you hear it's referred to as like starfishing, a power clean, a power snatch, or a power jerk. A person will jump the feet wider to get under the bar, to get lower under the bar. But after a certain point, your feet can only go so wide before you just completely lose stability. And and you're no longer able to stay upright or to have any sort of balance whatsoever underneath the bar. So I would tell him just to think about keeping his feet more under him. Like, even if his feet still jump out, he could visualize keeping his feet under his hips when he lands in the jerk. So just in his mind, taking note of this hip, and his goal is for his feet to stay directly under him. So in his mind, not in actuality, but in his mind, when he lands in this jerk, it feels like his feet are still right here and right here. That might help. Just something to think about. All right. We will go on to the next lift. A couple of Blot Cleans from Jennifer. And Jennifer lives in Georgia. I believe she is from my hometown in Gainesville, or maybe somewhere around there anyway. But let's take a look at these cleans. And so when Jennifer sent these, she told me that she had trouble with Blot Cleans. Now, coming off the blocks is just an awkward position. The bar, I find that they're more difficult than hang cleans because the bar is starting at a dead stop, and then you're having to take something from a dead stop and generate enough momentum to be able to get it to your shoulders or to get it overhead. So take a little bit of learning, take a little bit of getting used to. But they don't feel comfortable for her, and the first thing that jumps out at me is her start position off the blocks. So her shoulders are directly above the bar. I can't see her knees right here, but it looks like maybe her leg is angled like this. And so the bar is in front of her. Now, if she were actually pulling the bar off the floor and performing a clean, what you would expect to see, let's see if I can draw it right here. This may or may not work out. So what I would expect to see is, say if this was her shoulders right here, say these were her hips right here. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, kind of. And that, I kind of fucked that up. But anyway, what I was trying to get at is the bar would most likely, if she was coming off the ground, she pulled the bar off the ground and then the bar was at her knees in a good position, her legs would be more straightened out. Her knee joint would be more straight. Like you see, and again, this is a pretty messed up drawing, but her shin should be more perpendicular right here. Her hips should be more back right here, and her shoulders should be more over the bar. So I'll try to draw this on top, transpose it on top of her body. So I'd maybe like to see her shoulders more right here, slightly ahead of the bar as the bar is passing the knees. So then her arm would be hanging like this, and maybe her hips are more out here. No, they wouldn't be right there, but maybe just a tiny bit more out here. And then so you draw her leg, and then maybe her shin is just more vertical, something like that. But I just know this wouldn't be the position she would be in if she was coming off the floor, or if she was coming off the floor like this. That would mean that the bar was in front of her in this pull right here. Like her body is behind the bar at this point when her body should be kind of on top of the bar at this point. Or another way to think about it, her hips should be behind the bar right here, and her shoulders should be slightly ahead of the bar right here, so that the bar is falling somewhere in between her hips and her shoulders. So, hope that makes sense. But when performing lifts from the blocks, it's very important that whatever height the blocks are at, you get your body into as similar of a position as possible of that segment of the lift, of where you would actually be in that portion of the lift. So something to think about. But Jennifer, if I had to guess, that's the biggest reason why the cleans feel weird. And so she has a straight pull. Like look at how she extends. Like that's a good extension right there. Her body is pretty vertical. That bar is pretty close. So that start position, I bet, is why they don't feel good. And the bar does crash a little bit. If you just watch that a few times, that bar kind of jolts her body. Notice how she kind of shakes as she catches it. So maybe fix that start position and that might help. But the bar crashing might be something that you need to address if it doesn't. But yeah, that's really what jumps out at me for these blot cleans and what could be improved upon is just that start position in general. Because right now, you're starting with your shoulders on top of the bar, which means that the bar is ahead of you. So, might be something to address, or it definitely needs to be something. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed. Oh, why did that come out weird? And then this last video is from Reagan. She performs the Voodoo solution, or generalized programming, which I don't know if any of you have no programming to follow, but it's only $20 a month. And we're starting to build a decent number of people performing the programming together. So we've started getting more aggressive in the weights these past couple of weeks in the programming. And what jumps out at me on this clean, biggest thing, and I think it's just an old habit coming back up and resurfacing, is she's starting to rock back on her heels again and the pull. So if you notice from, and you guys probably aren't going to be able to see it, but or maybe let me try to zoom in. This might work or might not. Let's see. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see it. But yeah, from here to here, she's rocking back on her heels because her toes are coming off the ground a little bit as the bar is passing her knees. So she's coming a little off balance. So I would first tell Reagan, think about driving through the middle of your foot next time she attempts a heavy clean. And she's improved her extension a lot. Look at how straight her body is, and look at how close that bar is to her body. I really like this extension. She's improved a lot on this. Receives the bar and stands up nicely. And if you were to look at the literature of Tommy Kono, he would say that when the bar is pulled properly, when the bar is pulled into the right spot, the athlete will spring out of the receiving position in a snatch or a clean. So just see that, how it's like, it just looks like one lift or one motion where she pulls the bar, she receives it, and as soon as she hits the bottom, she's able to just stand right up. Tommy Kono would say that's a sign of a properly pulled lift. And so I'm really starting to like her jerks. Maybe she could be more balanced as she prepares to dip for this jerk, because I can notice she rocks back onto her heels a little and then dips, so that may throw her off balance. But other than that, her jerk is really started to turn over a new leaf. She had a tendency to land with her back leg locked out, and her front leg used to look like this, or her front shin. If you were to look at her lifts, maybe, come on, if you were to look at her lifts maybe a few weeks ago, notice right now her front shin is vertical. If you were to have looked at her lifts a few weeks ago, her front shin would be inclined forward, so it probably would have looked more like this, and her front foot only would have gotten to like around here instead of where it is here. So improve where the front foot is going, and she's improved how this back foot is landing too, or how this back leg is landing. Look at how there's a little bit of give, a little bit of a bend in that back knee. So some people teach for the back leg to be bent about 90 degrees, almost like that. But for me, I just personally prefer it for the athlete. I mean, they can land with it that bent, they can land with it straight, but it can be straight so long as there is a slight bend in this back knee right here. Whoa, what's going on? My pen is acting up. But yeah, you never want a completely locked out back leg. What in the world? There we go. But yeah, long story short, you never want that back knee locked out. It can be straight, it can be bent, but if it's going to land straight, you still need to have a little bit of give in that back leg. You never want any joints locked out over the course of the lift. So, all right. And that's the last of the lifts we're covering tonight. It's a little bit of a shorter stream. If anyone has any questions, I'll take the next minute or two to answer them, and if not, we will continue on with the rest of the evening. So feel free to ask a question or two. Well, all right. If there are no questions, then I'll hop off. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and maybe in a week or two we'll have another one of these. But yeah, hope that helps. And again, remember, that's just my opinion, just one of many in there. So, all right, you guys have a great rest of your evening.